Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. Today, I'm joined once again by Bernadette Joy, author, podcaster, and speaker. We'll be talking today about why financial fluency and not just literacy is the next step forward. Welcome, Bernadette.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, excited to have you. I mean, as we talked about pre-show, the whole concept of financial fluency has really resonated with me. I'm so excited to share this with my audience. So, tell us a little bit about your origin story, but more about how it led you to this concept of financial fluency.
Yeah, so I have been on my own personal finance journey now for 10 years. I started in 2016 with $300,000 of debt, including $72,000 of student loans and a mortgage. Fast forward 10 years later, spoiler alert, I paid off all the debt. I was able to quit my corporate job, start two different businesses. And the business that I started in 2020 is Crush Your Money Goals, where I set out to teach particularly underrepresented communities, financial education. And when I was doing my research, I was finding kind of the same usual suspects, right? Like the Dave Ramseys of the world. And if you really want to get into more like investing type of stuff like Ramit Sethi and Susie Orman, like a lot of people who are talking about finances. And then I also looked a lot into, well, what are we teaching at younger stages? What are we teaching when people just graduate from college? And there's all of these like financial literacy programs. And so, I, in my own thirst for knowledge back in 2016, had looked at all these different programs before I started my own business because I found that there was a need to create education that was shame-free, that spoke to a wider range of audiences, and that still felt very manageable and doable, while also creating the possibility for people that, hey, maybe you can be financially free, not just financially stable. So fast forward to this year, I personally have been trying to learn other languages. I'm a big K-pop fan, and so it crushes my soul that I don't understand any Korean still, even though I consume probably more Korean content than Koreans themselves. And then I also had it in my heart to learn how to speak Spanish because it's on my bucket list to be able to teach Crush Your Money Goals in Spanish at some point down the future. And when I've been trying to teach Crush Your Money Goals financial education, I've always been trying to find other analogies to help people understand the different concepts. And before I was learning languages, I always told people learning money is less like math and learning more like music. Because I, at the time, was also trying to learn how to play drums. Like, if you can't tell, I have a lot of different hobbies. And I realized that the analogy was even stronger around the idea of really learning finances is more like learning a language. Because for me, my husband and I, the biggest fear that we have is when we go, for example, when we went to Korea or when I'm going to Spain in a couple of weeks, like I'm afraid of sounding stupid to native speakers, even though clearly this is not my first language. Clearly I'm still learning it, but how else do you learn a language other than practice? And so I started floating this idea of financial fluency around to my current cohort of people that I coach. And it just seemed to like, it felt like lightning struck the group in a really good way. I had several clients, especially a lot of my clients who come from immigrant families who come from multilingual backgrounds, said this concept of financial fluency already makes me feel so much better because it's very akin to when my mom had to learn English or when I was learning a new language. that, really the only way that you become fluent in any language is if you practice and you create habits and you actually have dialogue with people, and you don't just memorize the terms, you know how to use them in context, which makes a lot more sense versus literacy.
I love all that, but what you just said there about language helps you learn how to use things in context, I think is really important. The other thing you said there is that happens so often, excuse me,
Mhm.
frog in my throat, is when you're learning into languages, you do feel stupid because you don't know certain words and you don't want to say, but the money conversation is going so fast. So for me, excuse me, that's so much of what financial fluency resonated with me as well. Is like that whole thing of, you know, getting clients to really say what they're really thinking when you know that they're not saying everything that's on their mind. And we can even go back to sitting in school and nobody wants to raise their hand and be the one to say, well, I don't really understand this when it looks like everybody else in the classroom understands it. The other part that really resonated with me was the fact that, you know, nobody feels ashamed if they don't know another language. It's not a big
Hmm.
deal. You just haven't learned that language yet. And I think that's the
Hmm.
thing with money. And if we look at financial literacy and all the billions of dollars been spent, all the hours and products and everything else in financial literacy in the US and around the world is pretty much the same as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So it's like, hey, the current system, while it's providing great tools, isn't really making a difference. So this is so awesome. So,
Thank you.
let's go deeper into it. What does financial fluency mean to you, and how does it go beyond financial literacy?
So going back with this analogy of language, um, the way that I think about, if we start out with the kind of the basic definition of financial literacy, right? It's basically, knowing and understanding certain concepts and kind of the basics that I often see as an example in financial literacy is having a good credit score, like how to get a car loan, how to buy a home, like savings, what is a savings account, right? It's more fundamental things. And so I'm not in the camp of that there's no need for financial literacy at all, but I've caused quite a bit of a stir this last week because I wrote an article in a publication called Bankrate, which gets a pretty wide audience, that I said financial literacy is dead. And people really took offense to that. Uh and so why I'm bringing this up is because to me, what has happened for me and the communities that I serve, and this is, I think, the misunderstanding for a lot of other financial educators, and this is what I explained to a financial educator today. She took real offense to the fact that I said financial literacy is dead. And she said, well, I don't think you should be making blanket statements like that. And, that doesn't resonate with everybody. And I'm like, that's the point. Financial literacy has not resonated with a vast group of people, because if financial literacy was helping, like, no one would be complaining right now about the fact that they can't afford all these things that financial literacy is supposed to teach us. Financial literacy is teaching us how to have a good credit score, but how come people can't afford a home now? Like, what's going on here? There's a real gap here. And so going back to your question of like, what does it mean to me, is that I told her, I said, if this doesn't resonate with you, that's totally okay. Financial fluency for me seems to be resonating with me and my audiences. Again, a lot of my audience being first gen, because financial fluency, a lot of these people are coming to me after they've already tried the other things. They've already been through another program and realizing it didn't work for them, because no one was really stopping to say, hey, what's your goal here? Like, what are you trying to do by learning this language? So for me, if we take the analogy again of, let's say, learning Korean, it's not enough for me to just go to a restaurant and be able to order food. That's what I would say is financial literacy. Financial fluency would be me being able to go into, a gathering and having a conversation and getting to know someone and being able to ask the right questions and say, where's your family from? Like, how did you grow up? Actually having curiosity and being able to express my curiosity in a way that makes me feel fulfilled. And so for me, financial literacy was always dead. That's what I told this person. I'm like, financial literacy has been dead to me and my community because it has not served us. And financial fluency for me now is really when I say going beyond financial literacy, it's to say, hey, I can show up in different contexts, and I may not know the answers, but I'll know what questions to ask.
I think that's so important for me as an educator. My goal has always been to help people understand what questions to ask. Is, that's so I think, I may have shared with you, I've done some work as a litigation consultant, some work with the California
Mm-hmm.
Department of Insurance. And so I've seen a lot of bad stuff. And quite often it could have been avoided if people knew what questions to ask, as financial predators are able to, sort of, I don't know if steamroll's the right word, but they can just kind of smother the victim with their stuff. And it's because people don't even know what questions to ask, or they're scared to ask questions because they think, "Hey, money is not something I speak." And I'm sure you've heard that as well, as people say, money is like impenetrable. And that's something that, even the most diehard, personal finance people will say in financial services is like, yeah, we use a lot of jargon and we use a lot of
Mm-hmm.
terms that nobody else understands. Well, okay, what are terms that you don't understand? Well, they're a language that you don't speak.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to be, like, let's say a bond trader, you have to learn how to use all the terms. You can't expect to be an expert. It's like being a mechanic. You can't expect to fix a car without knowing what all the car parts are called and what they do. Now, I know nothing about cars, so I go to a mechanic and hopefully he can translate enough to me of what he's doing. But, it's not a language that I speak. And I think that's, to me, why it feels like you're so onto something. And I think this whole thing with financial literacy is that we've seen financial wellness over the last few years is a real push to rebrand financial literacy as financial wellness. And it's gone exactly the same place. For a couple of years there, everything was financial wellness. And now we're seeing that kind of fading away again because it was a move to rebrand, but it wasn't a successful move to rebrand. So, yeah, I mean, financial literacy, maybe we shouldn't say it's dead, but it sure hasn't been successful. So maybe it's on life
Mm-hmm.
support. So,
Well, I love that you brought up the financial wellness aspect of this, because I worked for a financial wellness company for a period of time, and then I have different corporate speaking gigs and programs that I run, and it's always been a challenge to market these types of programs under financial wellness, because people are like, I just don't even understand what that means. And nobody feels well. I mean, a lot of people just don't feel well. The general public that they're trying to serve doesn't feel well. And so the thing that's been interesting for me and what has been successful for me before even this fluency thing was that I always differentiated people. I'm like, I teach financial freedom, and fluency to me is the the way that we get there. So what I think is, if I could boil down, and I'm externally processing this, right, the difference between like financial literacy and what I'm trying to express with financial fluency is the difference between knowledge and habits. Like financial literacy, you can accomplish by memorizing a bunch of terms and like reading a bunch of books. But financial fluency, there is no way to achieve financial fluency without practicing, without intentionally using those skills on a regular basis in your everyday life. And I think that's also the other interesting thing. Pat Flynn, uh, who's kind of been a long time in the financial space, and he just came out with a book recently. I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago. He did a speaking engagement, and I really latched on to this idea of, he talked about just in time learning versus just in case learning. And financial literacy feels like just in case learning, meaning like, oh, you learn these concepts and then just try to remember them when the thing comes up. Right? Like, oh, I learned about a true story. I went to go teach some fourth graders about money. They're in a summer camp, and they had an hour session about financial literacy. And they all received a book that was sponsored by a bank about buying your first home and how to get a mortgage. It's like it's kids book
For fourth graders.
for
That's
fourth
important.
graders. Yeah, right. And so it's like that's like a very like just in case. Like, first of all, where's the book on? I hope I didn't read the book, but I'm like, there better be in the book that there's an option that if you save up enough money, that one day maybe you could buy a house in cash, or like maybe you don't need a house. maybe it's okay to be a renter. Like, I hope there's other conversations like that in the book. I suspect not, because what I figured out with a lot of financial literacy programs, because I'm in Charlotte, like we're in a banking city, like everything that is kind of guised as financial literacy is really an upsell into creating a new customer. That's what I found in my own research here in Charlotte. So on the flip side, with financial fluency with these kids, like what I talked to them about was that, I asked them, like, if there's something that you wanted to buy right now but you don't have the money, how would you get it? So like I asked the kids, like, what is it something that you really want? And some kid was like, I want a Labubu, which is like this really popular toy right now. And other kid was like, I want sneakers. I'm like, cool. So if you want sneakers or you want a Labubu, what's some way that you can save up money or make extra money to do that? That to me is more on the financial fluency side, because I'm teaching them something that is pertinent to them right now, versus what I find a lot of financial literacy to be like, just memorize all these terms. And then when the time comes, like, we just expect you to remember it, versus practicing it in real time.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to go back to what you said earlier, because I really want to emphasize it, just in time rather than just in case. And that's always been one of the issues I've had with financial literacy, is because people, if they watch the videos, which they don't always do, I've seen metrics on some of these financial literacy programs, behind the scenes, employees don't really watch the videos, or they watch one or two videos and, for 5 minutes. But it's like, how are you going to remember these things you learned 5 or 10 years ago to call back on it? Again, for me, it comes back to a curiosity. And learning a new language is something that you do because you're motivated to do it. Like, for you, it may be brushing up on Spanish now, because you're
Mm-hmm.
going to Spain. So you're motivated, but again, it's because it's just in time. Right now you're probably not feeling a lot of pressure to learn Greek, because you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Be great if you learned how to speak Greek, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Not advocating for anybody to go out there and learn Greek, but as an example. So I think what you're getting at is really important. I think that's the other thing that's really been missed, is that just in time versus just in case. Is we need to be able to help people access resources when they're ready to, but we need to underlay the basic structures for them to be able to do it. So, you know, how do you think that the shift to financial fluency can help close gender and racial wealth gaps?
Oh, what a great question. So at the surface level, I've been getting a ton of positive feedback from particularly women of color. A lot of my audience and and even my current coaching group are a lot of Black and Latino women. And the feedback I've been getting consistently is that there is this, to your point earlier, less shame around this. They've tried other programs, it hasn't worked for them for whatever reason. But I think the how do I say this? I would say that there is a bit of a more aspirational tone to financial fluency versus literacy. Like, financial literacy feels like something you have to do, versus financial fluency something that you choose to do. And so it creates this culture in my Crush Club. We meet every Sunday morning. You are a guest speaker at one of our sessions, and we meet every Sunday morning, and we have to always constantly remind ourselves, like, we're doing, like, this is a choice that we get to choose. This is not something that's being forced upon us, which sometimes financial literacy feels like it's being forced upon us, versus like what I'm trying to teach financial fluency is like, hey, you can choose the kind of regular standard living of what people are telling you, like, go get a credit card, go get a mortgage, go like do all those things. Or what about this thing over here of like, hey, what if you could be a multimillionaire retired at 40, traveling the world, going to all the K-pop concerts? And that's not a what if, that is like my actual life right now. And so what I think has been really exciting for me is that I have been testing out this concept across a broad range of types of clients. So just in the past 2 weeks, since you and I had that conversation a couple of weeks ago, I taught a 30 interns at KPMG, accounting firm. I taught all of the staff at my yoga studio. I taught fourth graders, and then I taught high schoolers. And then yesterday I taught several mental health professionals. And those are pretty different audiences, race, gender, age, all of that. And everyone felt like this concept was doable. Even though I'm teaching them something aspirational to say, hey, what I say it in front of all of my classes. I say, to be clear, this is not a financial literacy class. This is a financial freedom class, and I'm going to teach you how to be fluent in finances. It shifts their brain to say, oh, okay, I'm going to be learning something that is, if I don't get it right the first time, that doesn't mean I'm stupid. And what I also really love about how I think this can close the racial and gender gaps here is I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without I was like going to mention names. I'm like, oh wait, hold on. Because I have met several women recently of color who have actually accumulated enough wealth that they could retire and no one's told them. Like I met a woman recently who has a $5 million net worth, and her first question to me was like, I need to cut more in my budget. And I said, for what? And she said, well, I need to make more money. I'm like, for what? What do you say? She's already in her 50s. She's had a very long career as an attorney. She doesn't want to do it anymore. And her first question to me, I need to save more money in my budget, which I would argue is financial literacy. Like she's saying, oh, like, I don't think I'm saving enough money, versus financial fluency is like, do you not know that you have enough money right now? Like you don't have to do any of this. And so there's also this section of people that I think are very underserved, which are people who have the first gen generational trauma of growing up in scarcity, that they actually made it. Like they figured out how to accumulate wealth, they made good money, but then they're still acting as though they need financial literacy when what they actually need is fluency. And so that's been very exciting for me to work with a lot of these women who are high earning. Like, for example, a lot of the people that I work with have no idea what an accredited investor is, even though they qualify. That's not being taught in financial literacy. I know that 100% that the concept of accredited investor is not being taught in any of those programs.
Yeah, and the one thing I know about most of these financial literacy programs is they're all pretty much the same. It's like, I mean, as you know, with my specialty in insurance, most of these programs, if they talk about insurance, it's very surface level, and it doesn't really get into the questions that people really need to have answered about their insurance, which is why I wrote all my insurance books, questions and answers. But anyway, that's what I found is like, okay, you have to actually ask these questions. But I think what you're saying is one of the things I heard you say was talking about scarcity. And if financial fluency can help people transition their mindset from scarcity to actually realizing that they have abundancy, I think that's really important. The other thing that I've seen in conversations and people who've listened to this podcast for a while, have heard me talk with a lot of women about this, is the women are coming from a very different place with the problems that they're trying to solve and with the approaches. But really, the biggest challenge has been that they feel completely overlooked by the financial services industry. And we can look, and only 30% of CFPs are women. 1% of CFPs are Black women. There's a huge underrepresentation in the whole personal financial services industry. And I think part of that comes back to knowing how to talk to people who are different than you are. As I've heard from so many people, well, I don't know how to talk to women. I'm like, really? How can you not know how to talk to women? Did you ever talk to your mom? Have you talked to your wife? Have you talked to your sister? You talk to women. You should be able to, but I think that's a huge problem in financial services, is that for whatever reason, and as a woman, this is definitely in your court, is like, how can financial advisors talk to women and feel
Hmm.
confident? I mean, can financial fluency help with that challenge?
Yeah. I love this. You're giving me all these questions, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna definitely have to reread this recording and think about how to encapsulate all of this. The short answer is I I think that why a lot of people are going to get scared about financial fluency if this ever takes off as a movement, as a concept, is that it will expose a lot of people to asking more questions about why these systems are set up the way that they are. And then once we start asking these questions about why these systems are set up the way they are, then a lot of these financial advisors who were trained to sell certain types of products and services are going to realize that these products and services were not built for women. So, uh, let me give you kind of a prime example that's something that's going on with my life right now is you had left a nice comment the other day saying I had announced that I'm doing this partnership with Invest for Better, which is a nonprofit that is trying to get more women into investing. And Janine Firpo, who's one of the co-founders, she and I met at FinCon, and we've been talking for the last couple of years. And we're trying to figure out a way to partner where, I would teach some of the fundamentals, the equivalent of like financial literacy, but get these women ready sooner than later to start investing. And what we're finding in kind of the feedback of a lot of people that I see, this is not theoretical. This is real life people. Is that people immediately go when I say people, I mean financial advisors immediately go to selling the solution that helps them make money, if it might, even if it's not the right solution for them. So I'll give you an example from yesterday is I taught this workshop for mental health professionals. It was 4 Black women. And I asked them in the beginning of the session, what do you want to learn? Here's my background. What do you want to learn? And they said, I want to learn how to buy a house and I want to learn about stocks. I want to learn how to buy stocks. And so I said, okay, we'll cover those questions. We go through my financial fluency model, Crush Your Money Goals, CRUSH. And by the end of it, they all recognize that they're not in a place to go into investing into stocks yet because all of them had either credit card debt, student loan debt, didn't have savings, uh, and didn't have a budget. And one of the things that two things struck me from that meeting. Number one was that this woman, she ended up in tears at the end of the session because the H stands for Heal Your Money Wounds, which again, this is why I akin this to literacy not being enough and fluency being important. It's like fluency incorporates context. Literacy to me does not incorporate context. They're just like, everyone should have a house, everyone should have a mortgage, everyone should have a credit card, or everyone should buy stocks. Versus this woman, she ended up in tears because she's saying, I asked them, what's a money belief that you've been holding on to that's not serving you right now? And she's just like, I keep thinking that I'm in survival mode. I'm in survival mode. And I'm like, but wait a minute, I thought you wanted to learn about stocks. Like she jumped all the way to this stock thing, which a financial literacy person would be like, yes, I can tell someone what a stock is and what that means and how to buy it on a brokerage account. And I had to say to her, I said, lovingly, you have paid a lot for this degree and it's crushing your cash flow right now because of these student loan payments that are coming back after they've not been they haven't had interest for however many years. And that was an investment. That was the first investment that you made was into your education. So finish what you started. And she said, no one has ever told me that before. In our community, and she talked about specifically the Black community, people are telling us, oh, we need to be investing in crypto and Bitcoin and stock market. No one is telling them like, hey, you need to finish paying off your student loans. Otherwise, they're going to keep following you the rest of your life. So I share that anecdote to say that there is a lot of discussion, and I've had this discussion with Janine as well, in that even she's finding that as she is talking to more communities of color, specifically Black and Latino women, that just talking about stocks and bonds and whatever is not resonating because we're not taking into account that Black women have the most like student loan debt and the highest level of education. And so we're telling these women, hey, you should go buy stocks when they're carrying like 6 figures of student loan debt and they don't have a plan around all of that. And so I'm very excited about this because I think a lot of people are going to understand that like context matters just as much as the terms and the knowledge and the emotional side of that too. And I think fluency speaks more to the idea of, being able to communicate in a way that's effective for women who have been overlooked.
Ooh, I like that, because I think that's really the part of it is the effective communication, and that the people that I've talked to in the situation is the same thing as you, is that a lot of people feel like they can't have these conversations or that the conversations aren't for them. I want to shout out to a resource that Romy Pickron. Are you familiar with Romy? Um,
Mm-mm.
so she's creating an app to help Black women pay off their college debt. She's a Black woman,
Mm.
CFP,
Mm-hmm.
and so she's been on the show. So I'll link for everybody watching and listening. I'll link to that episode so you can check out my
I love that.
conversation with Romy and her app, Reducify, which that's a purpose because, as you
Oh,
mentioned,
I have
Black
heard of the
women.
app. I've heard of the app. Yeah.
Oh,
Reducify.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So. Um, because yeah, Black women carry more college debt than any other demographic. Um, and then the other thing is, I just do want to give a shout out to Invest for Better and Janine Furpo, and of course that'll be in the show notes. And I've also had a conversation with Janine. Actually, I've had a couple different shows with Janine where we've talked about Invest for Better and the investing circles for women. So for any women who are listening, there will be a link so you can check out what the work that Invest for Better is doing. There's some great investing classes, and or you can join the investing circles and learn more about investing. Um, so because they're both doing great work. So yeah, I'm glad you've given us a shout out. I was so excited to see you partnering with Janine because I know she tries to get some very diverse people to help lead the circles or lead educational initiatives. So that's awesome. So one other question. I think this is one that we obviously is going to take a lot of work. But how can we start establishing and using financial fluency as a framework, or where do you see the next steps are for financial fluency?
So sounds like a selfish plug, but I
Go
wrote a
for
book
it.
this year. It's Crush Your Money Goals, and it was what led me to start thinking about this idea of financial fluency. And so what I'm doing now with my team is we're marrying these concepts between what we've had in the book and how that actually plays out as a framework for financial fluency. And so that's what we've been testing out the last couple of weeks is looking at Crush and how we are incorporating this idea of financial fluency across different types of groups. This is why I've been going out and doing all these workshops. And so one, if you're listening and want to pick up a copy of the book, it is Crush Your Money Goals by Bernadette Joy, and it's available on all the different bookstores, but it's also at your local library. I was so excited. I found out, speaking of literacy, I went to my local library this past week and found out that my book was borrowed 39 times in my local place. And so that's to say what I found from people, this is the biggest point of feedback that I've gotten from folks, is that they, especially ones who got the audiobook, because it's available in audiobook too, is that a lot of people have realized that they needed a notebook to go with it because there was so much that they were taking as like things to do versus just things to learn after they were reading the book. And there's a lot of prompts in there that helps people ask the right questions or start to think of those questions. So that's number one. Number two is if you're already someone who has a financial advisor, this came up in my Crush Club session this past week. Someone said, because the question was, what do you think is holding you back between what your financial independence number is and where you are right now? And what scares you? And one of my members, he is a Filipino, so immigrant family, and he said, I have a financial advisor. He makes good money, but he's afraid to ask his financial advisor like anything. And this also came up last week. I was in a meeting and someone said, "Oh my God, I have to talk to my financial advisor, and I hate her."
Oh, geez.
So bizarre. This is so bizarre. This is not the first time. And then Three's a Charm is my in-laws, so my husband's parents. They're in retirement mode, and they keep asking me all these questions because obviously what I do for a living. I'm like, have you talked to your financial advisor about this? Did you ask them? Because he's the one who's managing their funds right now. And my mother-in-law said, I don't want to ask him any questions. So there's like a weird dynamic, particularly again with underrepresented communities. There's like a power dynamic that seems to be strange about asking someone who's managing your money, who's working for you, questions. And so the second thing that I'm telling everyone to do right now is if you have not talked to your financial advisor recently and asked them, hey, this is what my goal is. What are you going to do to help me get there? Which is why I teach everyone the financial independence numbers and the 4% rule and all of that. But the second question that I told all of my clients to ask them, ask your financial advisor, how much the service is costing you this year? And they're going to say some version of like 1% of your assets or whatever. And said, ask them, how much is the service costing me in dollars this year? And then ask yourself, do you feel like you're getting your money's worth? And if the answer is no, then put them to work. They are working for you. And so if you don't understand certain terms, or you don't understand what's going on in your portfolio, or you don't understand how, like, why your cash flow is not great, that's literally a financial advisor's job to help you with that stuff. And if they make it feel intimidating, if they make it feel like they can't ask you the questions, then we need to like really evaluate who's on your team, who's really going to help you get there. Similarly to imagine if I hired a Spanish teacher and I was like, well, I don't want to ask her any questions, like, and I'm going to keep paying her. That doesn't make any sense. So similarly, if you're working with someone already, make sure that you're getting your money's worth, and it doesn't have to be contentious. You can just ask them like, hey, I'm not clear on how much I'm paying you, and I'm not clear on these things that are related to my goal. I want to understand how you're helping me in this.
Yeah, and for people watching and listening, a good financial planner will answer that question for you, and they will be glad to answer it and explain it to you. So that's a warning sign right there, is if you're a financial planner or financial advisor, and I use the word advisor in quotes, is because there are a lot of people who don't want to, we'll say, cosplaying as advisors when they're not really financial advisors. So yeah, that's a very fair question to ask, and it's an important thing for you to know because it is your money, and and I talk about this for people who have a copy of my most recent book, The Get Ready Blueprint. My shameless plug here is, I talk about that. It's your money. Make sure you're getting what what you want from it. Don't be afraid. If you're afraid to ask your advisor a question, then you need to find a new advisor. It's as simple as that. And if you're an advisor, we're talking about the age of AI and replacing advisors and everything. If your clients don't feel comfortable talking to you, and your clients aren't asking you questions, that's a really good sign that you need to rethink how you're doing things. If I gave a presentation to a group or I was working with a client, if they didn't ask any questions, I knew I had done something wrong. Because anytime you meet with somebody, it should evoke questions. And if it's not evoking questions, I think that that's a bad thing. And like you said, is you have to be feeling comfortable to ask questions. And I think oftentimes, women and people of color, may be intimidated in that situation and not feel that it's okay to ask a question. And so I think that, yeah, if we can change that dynamic where people start feeling really comfortable asking questions, then they're going to be truly empowered to take control, because it's not going to come from being able to know the 5 ways to fund a 401k. That's not going to make us feel in control of our money. Understanding how it works and the language is what makes us feel in control. So,
Mhm.
to wrap up, you mentioned your book, Crush Your Money Goals, but where else can people learn more about you, and where can they listen to your podcast?
Yes. So I always love speaking with you. If you want to follow me on any of these other platforms, I mainly hang out on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn, Bernadette Joy, spelled with the word debt. And then I write articles for Bankrate as an expert contributor, as well as CNET and CNBC. And so those are all free resources. And I love plugging the articles in particular because they are longer form and talk about these topics. Like even this conversation today came up because of this article that I had written. And then lastly, if you want to start putting some habits into place, aside from the book, we have a free guide. So if you go to crushyourmoneygoals.com/free guide, you can download what we call our cha-ching checklist, and it walks through a multi-week plan, like literally Monday do this, Tuesday do this, Wednesday do this. So if you don't want to think too much right now and you just want to get some good quality data to start those habits, it's at crushyourmoneygoals.com/free guide. And we are always looking for new members to join our Crush Club if you want to really deep dive into your own personal finances.
Awesome. And for everybody watching, listening, as always, there'll be links to Bernadette's book, podcast, and website, so you can easily find her, and those will be in the show notes. Bernadette, thanks for joining me again on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. You're always such a joy.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in, as always, to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to change the way you think about money, please be sure to subscribe and to tell a friend. And if you'd like to stay in touch, you can join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com and find out a whole bunch, discover a bunch of free resources, get my weekly newsletter, and find out, because I am going big on financial fluency. So you're going to see a lot from me on this topic over the next few weeks. So until next time, let's change the way we think about money.